Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to the Hindus webinar on the topic how to use AI to generate code. We have a distinguished panel with us. Let me introduce them. We have Professor Arun K. Tangirala, who is a professor at the Department of Chemical Engineering, IIT Tirupati, and a professor on DN at the Department of Data Science and AI, Vadhwani School of Data Science and AI, IIT Madras. He's a Dean of Competency Development and Outreach at IIT Tirupati. His research focuses on fundamental problems in systems and control theory, data science and AI, and their use in process engineering, fault detection, transportation, climate, biological processes, and education. Dr. Tangiralo also leads the Swayam Prabha project as his chief coordinator. The project is a high impact, large scale outreach educational initiative of the Ministry of Education, Government of India. Welcome, Dr. Arun. Our other panelist, Anand, is a co-founder of Gramanar, data science company. He leads a team that tells visual stories from data. He is recognized as one of India's top 10 data scientists and is also a regular TEDx speaker. Anand is a gold medalist from IIM Bangalore and an alumnus of IIT Madras, London Business School, IBM, Infosys Consulting, Lehman Brothers, and BCG. I can also personally vouch for Anand as a trainer of for scores of data journalists in India in the past decade. Uh, I am one among them, and Anand's work has acted as a catalyst for the flourishing of data journalism in India, including in the Hindu. He has helped us with a number of projects and guided us about the use of numerous tools and applications. He's also the world's first officially designated LLM psychologist. We'll get to that later, what it exactly means. Welcome, Anand. Welcome to both of you to the show. So before I start, before we listen to them, I just wanted to elaborate the topic a bit. We know that Gen AI has revolutionized the field of information technology. The advent of Gen AI has meant that information dissemination has graduated from the use of search engines that pointed to websites and used to organize the gates to the vast information network that is the internet. Gen AI, with some risks, has now provided the ability to organize information in the form of answers to prompts and questions. It has also provided a key to produce meaningful information out of data using natural language prompts. We have known and discussed the issues with information created by Gen AI, the issue of hallucination, misleading conclusions due to skewed and biased data that the models are trained on, among others. But there is a much bigger and beneficial, in my opinion, flip side to the use of Gen AI. This regards the use of prompts to create code and programs, including for people who are not strongly trained in programming or coding. This utility is, in my opinion, as a journalist, transformational. I can attest to the Gen AI's coding ability helping us in the Hindus' data and visual journalism. We were able to create visual stories, mine and scrape data, organize and visualize data in ways that was not possible for us before the advent of AI to do it on our own. So clearly, the potential of using Gen AI to write structured code raises the possibility of revolutionizing the coding industry, with tasks becoming far more easier for coders and programmers. But it will also come up with fresh risks. How does this affect white collar workers, coders in particular, and their jobs? How do we make use of this profound facility? What kind of training and skilling is required to hone graduates to utilize the power of Gen AI? How do we mitigate the deleterious impact on white collar jobs and instead use this as an opportunity? That will be the subject of discussion with our panelists in our webinar. I'll just go to Professor Arun first, and he has a presentation. We'll start off with that. Dr. Arun?
Are you able to see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get started. I completely agree that AI has taken the world by storm and has been kind of disruptive in many, many ways. And it has begun to revolutionize every sector, including, of course, education and learning. And there are many aspects of learning and education that AI has been impacting significantly and will continue to do so because the AI technology itself is evolving. And most of us really do not know the potential of these tools. And therefore, we will have to spend some time figuring out how to use it best, apart from handling other issues such as accountability, ethics, and so on. But I can tell you that AI has been very impactful in bringing about personalized education, large scale learning, enhancing edutech solutions, and of course, the topic of today, code generation and evaluation. Apart from that, of course, you have AI impacting analytics and so on. And AI has also generated enormous resources and continues to generate. Now, one point that I want to make as we move along is something that we made even in the last webinar about a couple of months ago with the Hindu, where we spoke about AI in education, that we should not be thinking of these tools as tools. I think they have a human nature to it. And both Anand and I agreed. In fact, Anand cannot disagree because that is why he calls himself as LLM psychologist. And typically, we talk of psychologists for human beings or for living beings. And therefore, LLM, you may call it as a large language model. You can even say it's a living language model, more close to that, or large living model, whichever way you want to look at it. So it's important to develop that perspective, because once you start treating it as a trained human, then you know that the tool comes with its own pros and cons. So in general, AI has had a multidimensional utility, and it will not all of these are actually explored currently, but what I have listed in this graphic, this is something that even I think showed last time, that AI is useful in general, whether it's a student on the right side or a teacher on the left side. It doesn't matter. Both of them continue to benefit from the knowledge enrichment that LLMs bring with them, and the personalized learning that as a teacher I can set up. And in fact, there are many ecosystems that have started to come bloom these days, something like school AI and so on, which sets up an entire ecosystem, not just having the LLMs, but you can have chatbots and so on. So it's like I hire an AI TA and I customize the TA, and ask that chatbot to answer questions that the students may have. I can even keep track of the questions. I can generate assessments and so on. So there are a lot of things that can be done which you couldn't think of earlier. But all of this has to be done in an ethical way, and you'll have to have the infrastructure. And of course, both students and teachers have to be trained. And finally, you'll have to bring about curriculum changes to be able to use AI for all these. The focus of today's session, as was mentioned, is AI for coding. And you can see I put coding on the teacher side as well as on the student side on the right,
Hmm.
because I use it for I use AI tools for bringing up codes, and I use those codes to teach. I'll give you an example a bit later. So let's pause for a moment and ask, how do humans learn to code? I mean, this has been there for about 40, 50 years, right? And the answer is by training in a sequential order of concepts, right? Through courses, could be short term, could be full semester, and so on. And one of the first things that we are taught is computational thinking, and this has really picked up momentum even at the school level. It's very important to go through this thinking. Even though you're not doing computation, you can read it as computer like thinking. How does a computer think? And there is a logics, there is a sequence, and so on. And of course, then you have programming. And I want to really highlight this. Programming is both a science and an art, right? So art comes from experience, and science is taught in the courses. So you learn the language such as C, Python, R, and so on. And then we are also taught the art of writing programs. Donald Knuth, who is considered the father of modern programming, has some excellent material on that, where we are taught flow charts, modules, interconnections, and so on. And for advanced learners, it could be about understanding the compilers and interpreters and so on. And then the learners get to write practice codes, starting from simple ones to big projects. And they evaluate, they compare different codes written by different people or by the same person, different ways, debugging and hacking codes. I mean, ethically, of course, ethical hacking and so on. And then if you're really passionate, then you join the coding community. I know for sure Anand was coding even way before perhaps he was he joined me as my classmate in IIT Madras. So there are people who are very passionate, and when you think of coding, you can code for data science, for gaming, for software development, building models, etc. So the end use really determines what you code, and today what tools you will use. And there are many university programs, online courses, and so on. So this is how humans learn. Now you contrast this with how AI learns to code, right? Unlike humans, AI models learn to code through tons of examples. And we use NLP, natural language processing methods, combine it with heavy duty neural networks and deep learning algorithms. And the result of all of that is large language models that we see today, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, whatever, right? Many of, and the likes of those. And models are fed with thousands of code data sets and trained with learning algorithms. And the main feature of these trained models is that the user can write simply a text instruction to generate a code. And of course, that is where the prompt engineering comes in. This is completely a revolution in that sense. We used to do that with humans. Now we are doing this with AI models. You could tell the coder in your office or in your lab, I would like to you to write a code for doing this, and so now you're going to tell the model. And AI tools for coding are also equipped with the ability to translate code from one language to the other. For example, R to Python and Python to R, COBOL to Java, etc. Um, of course, from all of this, using, and as Srini also mentioned, using Gen AI to write codes has several benefits, but not without its issues and challenges. So I have, like we have FAQ, I have FBQ, few burning questions. Um, we don't need to answer everything here, but I've just put up this list. Some of these questions may also reflect in the Q&A session. So one of the questions that people ask is Gen AI based coding same as low coding or no coding? Not really, not at all. Because low coding or no coding has got to do with drag and drop. There would be pre-built templates and so on. I'll have an entire library and I'll just put those modules together. I don't have to write the code. And that's how I build the entire code. Whereas Gen AI based coding is completely prompt based. And the better your prompt is, the more effective your code is. Some of the people, I mean, this is a very standard question I also saw in the list. I'm a newbie to coding. Could I straight away start using Gen AI? Will I learn how to code if I use these tools? Well, here is where you have to think whether you are going to be a learner or a one time user. If you're a one time user, then yeah, you could, I mean, even a learner could straight away start using. But what you do after is determined by what your aim is. You can certainly start with using Gen AI tools or coding, but you wouldn't know whether this code is correct, it is very efficient, and so on. Therefore, it is always good to go through, even today, basic programming course in that language, so that at least you look at the question, you should know what the shopkeeper is giving you, whether it is of good quality or not. And then by looking at the code, you can also improve your coding. So there are several benefits, but you will have to use this um, with human intervention under the guidance of a trainer and so on. The big question is, what are the prime benefits and risks of using AI tools? I've just highlighted a few. For example, you can improve productivity. I mean, I don't need to spend a lot of time in learning how to code and putting together. I would rather learn the concepts and then use these tools for coding, but I should have a minimum skill, minimum knowledge of coding. But uh, after all of this, what I do is I save time, and therefore I can focus on what my expertise is. And it also gives a lot of accessibility. So today, people who do not know coding can also use this. But as I said, you'll have to be really having minimum skills to see if the code is correct or not. And the risks are, of course, trustworthiness. Is the code correct? Is it going to crash your computer? Is it going to, cost your job? And so on. You'll have to think. And it may not be able to handle nuances. But all of these can keep changing. But one of the biggest risks is security and over reliance and bias. So your tool can be hacked and your code can be inserted with a lot of things that you wouldn't know. So you need a very secure platform to use this AI. Then what is the role of programmers in this emerging era? some people believe that my job as a programmer is going to go away. Yes, that is true if you stick to only writing codes. One has to now upskill oneself and say, now I will I will learn how to evaluate a code. I will also be an expert in comparing two codes, and also to be able to nudge these tools to write better codes and so on. So, which means that I still go through programming courses, but not to necessarily write codes, but to make the codes coming from AI tools better and better and more reliable, right? And by the way, AI tools, yes, they know how to debug and evaluate, but that is a developing feature. And the question is, how important is prompting and ethics? We'll talk about ethics as we go along. It's a very very open ended question. For example, if I write a code, if I use AI tool to generate a code, clearly it is producing this code because it has seen this code somewhere written by someone else. So is it fair enough to use someone else's code without knowing who wrote it? So the least that one is being asked to do is declare that you have used an AI tool for generating this code or assisting you in writing this code, right? You would never know who wrote this code. And there are many other issues. So suppose some code goes wrong and you've developed it and you've given it to a client and used it, then whose responsibility it is? And so these are being debated. Yes, so there was the prompting is a very, very important aspect of using LLMs, whether you're using it for coding or knowing more. And I would say this is not new. In fact, I will go one step forward and say, in all the ancient scriptures, doesn't matter from which part of the world, we have seen that knowledge has come from questioning, and one has to learn how to question. It is both an art and a science. So I'm glad that AI basis LLMs are actually forcing people to ask, to think, which was not happening earlier, right? And there are many courses that are being offered in prompt engineering and so on. What is important is to state clearly what kind of code and functionalities you would need. I'll show you with one example for 2-3 minutes, and then I'll hand over. And you'll have to scope the code. You'll have to tell what you want from the code, what output format you want, and also you can ask the tool on best prompting practices. In fact, it's a very interesting thing. The same tool that is generating the code can help you with and guide you on how to prompt it, right? It's like saying, ask me in this way, then I will do better for you. And now the future is in conversational ML or AI, and it's a very exciting direction. I'll not go into that right now. I just want to conclude with this just quick couple of slides, and then 2 to 3 minutes demo on Perplexity, and then of course Anand will have ample time to demo a few tools and so on. So the purpose of showing this schematic, I showed this even in the last webinar, is as we adopt tools and as we make changes at the teaching or at the technology level, we will have to incorporate changes in the other components of the educational system. So institute has to come up with policies. Institute also has to encourage self-learning, and peer learning has to be encouraged, because you'll have to join coding communities and so on. And libraries also have to pick up. They can actually become repositories of algorithms or of even best AI practices for coding or best AI tools, and they can keep on updating it and so on. So I just want to say this, that with AI based coding or AI based education, you will we will all have to redefine outcomes, our roles, while integrating these tools, and we have to develop competence and not just being competitive. And ultimately, we have to be human, scientific, and artistic. So there ends my presentation, but I just want to augment this with a simple demo on Perplexity. There are many, many tools today. You could use ChatGPT, Claude, Cursor, Perplexity, Gemini, and so many other tools exist. But I'm just using Perplexity. And since I come from a data science background, I will ask Perplexity to write a code, right? In R script, because by default, all these tools assume you're interested in Python, but I want to use R. Write a code in R for developing a linear regression model. Okay. So yeah, so it has installed. And one of the things, good things about any tool is it should be able to explain what it is doing. So it is saying, load this package and so on, and then load your data. But if you do not know any of these packages, right, you would not understand fully these lines. You will just take it like a bull and keep going. That's not recommended. So it says load your data. It's loading some sample data, and then it is exploring the data, generating summary statistics, uh, and so on. And then it is fitting a linear regression model. Now you can see here that it is using LM, which is a very standard routine in R for developing or fitting linear regression models, and then makes predictions and then visualizes the results. I'm not going to run this code, but what is important is to go over these related questions. But what I'm going to ask Perplexity is, um, write this code from scratch without using LM. Okay, so let's see if it can actually does it. So it says certainly yes. Now what it does is it doesn't use LM, and now it actually defines a function, and it also gives you the math behind it, which is great, right? As a teacher, I find this very, very useful to teach certain audience. um, let's say I have industry audience, and I can start from bottom up. I can say let's start with the code and understand each line of this code. So you can see here, in fitting linear regression models, you can see that it is calculating the coefficients using this formula, right? And then it's preparing data and so on. So it is using the original formula. And I can ask this question, um, what is the benefit of using LM versus writing from scratch? So it gives the answer. I mean, it's just fantastic. So it says, it is the LM function is easy to use. It has built-in diagnostics. It has been optimized. It is robust, and it has comprehensive functionality, which I completely agree with, because it has been a tested routine. And then there are challenges in writing from scratch. Now, having said that, there are also benefits in writing from scratch, because yeah, it will enhance the understanding. So it says that here, underlying mechanics, right? Whereas using the LM function is generally more practical for most applications. So it depends on what you're doing. If you're in a teaching environment, then you prompt accordingly. If you are in a user environment, then you keep going and use some standard routines and so on. And I'll end with asking, what are, they say, suggest good prompting practices. So it says clarity, specificity, context, and background. You will have to actually avoid these mistakes, vagueness, and so on. So this tool itself is so self-contained, and I'm not advertising for Perplexity. I'm sure you can ask these questions in Cursor, or even Chat GPT and so on. But what I'm saying is, just don't use the tool for coding. You get one code and you're be happy. You're happy. No, it should not stop at that. You should explore. You should prompt, and you should learn to evaluate. In fact, you can give codes to these tools and ask it to debug and so on. So there's so many things that one could do, and it looks very promising. But as I said, we'll have to use these tools carefully, so that we don't step on the ethics aspect of it. Okay, so that is what it is. I'll stop at this point, and
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Arun. Instead of taking questions right away, I think we'll go to Anand. Before I go to him, first of all, thank you, Dr. Arun, for the lucid explanation on the impact of AI and aspects related to coding with AI tools and its implications for programming, programmers, and non-programmers, and even programmer wannabes. So Anand, you are a practitioner and coder, right? Nothing can emphasize the import of Gen AI and its ability to code than to see it in action. Dr. Arun just gave us a little bit of a taste of how to do that. But can you also provide us more examples? We would also love to understand what is the meaning of the term prompt engineering. And while you're at it, can you also elaborate the meaning of the term LLM psychologist? Over to you, Anand.
Uh, Prompt engineering is basically learning how to talk to LLMs. And this is not obvious. What research is showing is, for instance, that if you tell an LLM, give me a good answer, my life depends on it, the answer tends to be right more often. If you say, I will tip you $10,000, then it gives a better answer more often. The higher the tip, the incrementally higher the quality of the answer as well. And this falls under one category called emotional prompt. So the fact that an LLM would be prone to emotional blackmail, if you will, is not obvious and is the kind of thing that people are discovering through prompt engineering. And it's therefore a field in itself. And part of why I call myself an LLM psychologist is because I'm poking around LLMs, asking them questions like this, trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work, etc. We've learned a few things around prompt engineering that seem to work across models too. Number one, there is a technique called chain of thought, which simply asks an LLM to think step by step. Write whatever you want, and then at the end say, think step by step. It does better. Begin with, you are a ... You are an expert Python programmer. You are an expert psychologist. It tends to do better. Giving examples makes a huge difference. It follows examples very well. Instead of asking it to categorize something as high, medium, low, or giving a rating on a scale of 1 to 5, split it into a series of yes or no questions. You get far more robust results. These are examples of prompt engineering tips that are scientifically proven to be reliable. To your second question, and maybe if Ravina, you could help share my screen, let me walk through a few more examples of how we can apply what Arun just showed in terms of generating code. I'm going to take a slightly different scenario. Rather than copy paste code, I want the program to be built and deployed automatically. One of the first problems that I have is usually clients come to me with some vague requirement. They don't know what they want. And then they say, now give me the solution first. For example, and in fact, Srini a short while ago was talking about an election dashboard. When we were first approached in 2014, one of the media channels effectively said, look, we want an election dashboard. It should look beautiful, but we don't know what it should have. So that's an example of something where we can say, create an election dashboard for Indian national elections. It should look really beautiful and be interactive, and basically media should love it for all I care. And yeah, just give me a design for this that I can build on top of, but make it like a demo that looks like it's real so that I can show it to the client. So which means put in the names of parties and all of that stuff. Now you notice that I'm writing like I'm talking, and that's okay. These things are smart. That's why they are called artificial intelligence. They got to apply their intelligence, right? And they do a pretty decent job of applying that intelligence. In this case, what it's doing is using an approach called a canvas approach. A canvas is where there is something, in this case on the right-hand side, which it can edit. And that editing part, that conversation, happens on the left-hand side. So now it is doing all kinds of stuff, writing some fairly detailed code, and it's come up with a dashboard. This looks like a pretty detailed one. The beauty of this is I can click on publish and copy the link, and it is actually available as a dashboard that you can see, or I can pass to the client, which is pretty helpful. Now, this is not bad. Here's the thing. I can take this and start writing code, but I have some problems with it. Firstly, I want it to fit on one screen. Second, there is no animation. So rather than try and change the code myself, I will tell it, I want it to fit in one screen, add animation. Things should bounce around because clients like that sort of thing. And give it. Now, what it's going to do is revise the code that it wrote earlier, starting with that as a base, and then improve it in whatever ways it needs to. Now, you'll notice that it's actually cooking up data as well. BJP wants so many seats, Congress wants so many seats, AITC, DMK, blah, 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 with specific vote shares, etc. So it's doing a reasonably realistic job. Not only don't I have to imagine the dashboard, I don't have to imagine the data. It will give me the rough data structure that might appear in this case. And you'll see that it's adding some animation, bouncing, bouncing slow, slower, slowest. No idea what it's doing, but let's just publish it, copy the link, and see what the output looks like. Firstly, yes, it's fitting in one page. Secondly, it's also animated. It bounced around a little bit. There's a certain amount of movement. And I can use this as a starting point. Now, the thing is, for one of my junior developers to have gotten this far would have taken them minimum 1 day if they are really good, and probably 3-4 days if they are not. So it provides that kind of a starting point, which I think is really powerful. Back to you, Srini.
Thanks, Anand. Thank you for this using a live example to explain how you can use prompt to quickly generate code, and you showed us you can make an election dashboard in a jiffy, but also use it as a starting point to work on it further. I would like to ask a question related to that. Dr. Arun alluded to that. He specifically asked his model, "Can you write up? Can you use R?" Right? In this case, you had just asked the the LLM to just generate the code. So typically, do GenAI models generate code in multiple programming languages, or are they specialized in one particular single effective language, let's say Python? Do you in your course actually tell it to use a particular language, or it automatically chooses the best programming language suited for the task that you provided it?
The more popular the language, the more training data it has, and the more it has learned about it. And there is a lot of training data about Python, about JavaScript, than compared to, let's say, Fortran or COBOL or Perl, or even some of the relatively newer languages, let's say like Julia. Secondly, the companies that do the training have their own preferences. And because AI models are built by data scientists and data scientists use Python, they tend to train first and more on Python than other languages. It's not just at a library level, it happens at it's not just at a language level, it happens at a library level as well. So for instance, Pandas, which is one of the popular Python libraries, tends to have a significantly higher representation than a library called Polars, which is almost the same, newer, faster, considered better in many ways, but not as many examples out there. So unless you explicitly poke it, it will not write Polar's code, and even then it won't write it as well as Pandas code. In short, popular languages tend to work better.
My next question to you is, again, segueing from what Dr. Arun told us in the presentation, what kind of training and what kind of education do you think users should have to understand if the code is efficient? And tell us more about who can use GenAI to generate and use code optimally, and what kind of specific training should non-programmers and non-coders avail in order to kickstart this?
The research and anecdotal evidence seems to show that, one, experts benefit more than novice developers, which is unfortunate, but across fields, experts are benefiting more from AI than novices. So what can someone who is learning programming or even midway through their programming career do? One, don't memorize syntax. Learn Data structures, algorithms, design patterns. These three work across languages and are useful to tell AI what to do and review it. Second, practice using AI for coding, and that involves several areas. Start with debugging. My code doesn't work. Copy paste, put it into ChatGPT, ask why, try and fix it. New code generation works better than updating code. It's easier. Go to that next. Do not write documentation. As a developer, suck at documentation, I assure you. So take your code, put it into an LLM, ask it to generate the documentation. It will do a fantastic job, saves you time. Test case generation. You hate writing test cases because you're a developer. You'd rather write more code than test your code. So delegate that to an LLM. These are four things: debugging, new code generation, documentation, and test case generation that every programmer should practice, because you don't really want to do it, and except for maybe new code generation. And LLMs do this well, so you don't have a problem. Thirdly, learn to review code by one, comparing multiple solutions. Give it to Claude, give it to Gemini, give it to Cursor, give it to ChatGPT, give it to Claude, and see what the differences are. Take the output of one and tell Gemini, Claude gave me this, critique this. Why should you waste your brain cells? Let them waste their GPU cycles and see the difference. You learn from that. Ask it to explain itself. Why did you choose this library? When Arun showed that it used LM for R, ask it, why are you using LM? Why not another library? What other libraries can I use? So apart from comparing, ask it to explain yourself. And third, just look for code smells. This comes with experience, but as you look at the code, you start wondering, what is this? Why does this feel weird? I never asked for any of this. And poke in those areas. That will build the skill.
Right.
Just wanted to
you
add,
also, when you, yeah, please go on.
just wanted to add to that. Because we teach a lot of data science courses and so on. Apart from the coding, the programming aspects that Anand clearly highlighted, I would say that the basic concepts. So the time has come where the teachers can actually focus a lot on concepts rather than coding, because sometimes significant time and effort goes in coding. So I can focus on concepts, and sometimes, I mean, not sometimes, it's a good practice to ask people to write a code and also map it with concepts. So previously it used to be the other way around. Take a concept and code it. But now what I'm suggesting is take a code and connect it with concepts. Then I know that you have understood that full cycle, right? So these are some questions that can be asked in the exam. Because today, of course, as Anand mentioned, I can go back to the Gen AI tool and ask, what is each line of code doing? It explains. But there is a lot of customization, or there is a lot of specificities that teachers involve in teaching. So that may not be captured by Gen AI. So it's a good idea for the programmer in a course, data science course, to be very strong in the concepts. That opportunity now arises, and that demand is there.
When Anand, both of you, when you used prompts, one thing I noticed was you used very precise English to tell what you exactly needed. So one thing I've noticed is Gen AI, because of its ability to interpret language accurately, people who provided prompts don't take the effort to give it proper, precise language. They assume that the model will understand. This is something I have learned while using Gen AI to generate code. What I noticed is if I use very precise language, very precise, very clear language, without grammatical mistakes, without spelling mistakes, and also giving it a flow that is the way I explain it to anyone, a human being, I noticed that it is able to generate code more accurately. Is there a truth to what I'm saying, or is it just something that worked for me?
LLMs are excellent at mimicking style. So if you mimic poor quality English, it assumes that it should give a poor quality response and gives it in that form. So it is actually trying to follow what you're doing in some sense, mimicking it. So does that mean we need to learn better English? Yes, maybe, but I think mostly no. Hold on, if LLMs are so good at English, can't they solve the problem themselves? And it turns out that we can do this very easily with a two-step solution. Internally in our organization, we found that people give terrible prompts. One person's entire prompt was just education dashboard. What am I supposed to do? Create the entire dashboard, create the scaffolding for it, what should it look like? So what we did was made it a two-step process. Step one was one LLM that said the user is giving a rough, crude, poorly worded prompt. Create a full-fledged specification that is enough for a software developer to build an entire application. So it creates the spec. And then we pass a spec to the same model, different model, whatever, and then it generates what the quality dramatically increases.
Understood. You flagged this, Dr. Arun, but I want to raise this question again. With respect to ethics, right? We know that the code that generates is also derived from its learning, which is based on largely open source databases and sources. What does it mean? What is the impact of this on the ownership and the license of the generated code?
Yeah, that actually still continues to be debated even today. I mean, European Union, everybody is trying to come to a consensus. But I think the broad understanding is if I'm a developer and I'm giving a code that doesn't matter whether it is being generated by AI or whatever, and if the use of that code results in some kind of harm, then the developer can be held responsible for that. Okay, so there seems to be some consensus of that. We don't have regulations yet anywhere in any part of the world. Certainly, what is being asked is to declare. In fact, very interestingly, I saw in one of the leading universities in Australia that they are asking students to not only declare which tool they have used, but also all the prompts that have been used. Okay, so that perhaps they can reproduce what is being given. So I think this is the best that people are being asked to do. Certainly, we are asking people to be acknowledging, and I think we should also sensitize individuals on whether the end use is to learn from coding and how to code, or the end use is just to use this code, because these are two different categories of users. In an academic setting, you will find the first category. In a corporate setting, it will be more of the second category, right? So people should acknowledge, because that declares how much they have put an effort of their own, what has been their capability, and so on. And in doing so, I think they become also aware that the learning has taken some beating by using the Gen AI tool. Um, Therefore, they should do more. The way I look at it is, today, instead of coding, learning how to code, the focus has shifted on how to prompt. And for that, again, as I mentioned earlier, one should know what are the possibilities, one should know the libraries, and so on. Yes, you can ask the Gen AI tool to tell us what libraries are available, like Anand mentioned, and so on. Still, that may not be up to date. Okay, and there are certain customization specificities and so on. So that also has to be taken into account. In the end, I think acknowledging clearly that I have used this tool is very, very important. So there is one question that's being flashed on the screen.
Are you on mute, Srini?
Additionally, could you respond? Okay, recommend platform.
Sorry. So there's a question from a viewer, Krishnamurthy Ganesan, who asks, as a non-programmer interested in stock trading, how can I leverage AI-generated code to analyze market trends or automate trading decisions? Additionally, could you recommend platforms like Cursor or others that are user-friendly and suitable for this? Anand, you can take this.
Actually, rather than me taking this, let's do one thing. Let's ask ChatGPT. ChatGPT,
Yes.
how can a person who is not a programmer create an application that wait, sorry, something went wrong. Let's try again.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it a shot. For some reason, my network seems to be acting up. I'm going to give it a shot and a shorter. But no, firstly, if you're not a programmer and want to trade based on stock market, one of the new features that ChatGPT offers is a really interesting one called scheduled messages, or sorry, scheduled tasks. Every day, you can ask it to send recent news, stock tips, whatever. It will do that by adding it to your chat. So that information itself is powerful. What that leads to is you don't necessarily have to build the application. Many others, including the likes of ChatGPT, are building many of the underlying tooling that you need to be able to do this more effectively. So the first thing that I would ask is, are you sure the best use of your time is in building this or in leveraging what others have built? But if you're saying, no, I actually want to build this because I have an interest in building, Cursor is a good starting point if you are a developer because it will naturally align with the developer workflow. If you are not a developer, then I would not recommend Cursor. Something like, let's say, okay, increasingly agents and agentic frameworks are becoming popular. None of them are good enough for a non-developer to use for anything more than a trivial application. I would suggest starting with Claude's artifacts, and beyond that, wait for 3 months for whatever comes in. That you can give them an instruction and it will create a full-fledged application. Today, none of those exist yet.
I just want to add one word of caution, like we keep saying, please don't ignore domain knowledge. Okay, just because there are Gen AI tools to generate these tools to analyze stock market trends, and if you have no idea of how stock markets work, then whether the stock market will crash or not, your investment is likely to crash, or your analysis is likely to crash. So better to have the domain knowledge so that you understand, even if ChatGPT or Gen AI explains what each line of code is doing, and you don't understand the terminology to be in the least, then you are in a soup. So minimal domain knowledge is very much required.
A related question. This is from Dr. Gerald Inico. He asks, the integration of AI tools has disrupted learners' abilities and creativity a lot. What are the strategies to overcome the challenges said above? And since AI primarily relies on past data and experiences, how can it drive true innovation? Dr. Aaron, a philosophical
Yeah.
question for you.
So one of the things I think we all of us need to reflect is the skill set that is required of a human being has changed over centuries, okay, or even over decades now. Just come to that time scale. Assuming that the same level of skills are required or same type of skills are required, same type of creativity is required, would actually stall our own growth. And the classic example is calculator, right? When calculators came in, before that, people knew absolutely and they had great calculation skills. Now you can ask, did calculators kill such creativity? Yes, but maybe it is also that the law of the nature is such that going forward, some other skill is required. Therefore, this is being shelved. Okay. There are always a few niche people who will continue to hone those skills. But in a broader sense, the innovations and creativity are not going to go away. You will have to come up with now new innovations, new creativity that will demand how you use these tools creatively. Even if I give you a calculator, there are many students who do not know how to even use a calculator. Computers came, even to date, there are students who are afraid of using computers, who do not know how to use computers, and so on. So the same will happen with these tools. But the only caution that I'll give is, unlike calculators and computers, these are interactive. So you will have to worry about privacy. You will have to worry about data privacy and security. But otherwise, I don't think that the innovation and creativity are going away anywhere. I always say this: please define what skills you want to impart to a given audience. Be it the students in your class, or there could be industry folks, or there could be some other audience. First, define your skills and then go about teaching them. and those keep changing. It is just a human tendency to start worrying about this. But otherwise, I think the demand for being on top of things is always there. That's not going to go away anywhere. And the person um, who will actually be successful is the one who is still innovative and creative with these new technologies. So, which means that we
Anand,
have
you
to
wanted,
revisit curricula and so on, right?
Anand, you wanted to add more to how innovation will not be lacking if we use Gen AI for coding purposes.
Let's ask. So I'm actually going to ask ChatGPT. ChatGPT, let's take the second part of the question. Since AI primarily relies on past data and experiences, how can it drive true innovation?
Good question, Anand. AI at its core is like a really smart librarian, great at finding connections in what's already been written. True innovation, though, often involves asking new questions or thinking outside the patterns. That said, AI can still spark innovation by combining ideas in ways humans might not have thought of. For example, it might suggest a Python script that blends geospatial data with customer sentiment, something no one had asked for, but suddenly feels groundbreaking. But here's the twist: AI needs humans to guide it. It's like having a Swiss Army knife. It's not innovative by itself, but in the right hands, it's a game changer. What do you think, Anand? Does innovation come more from AI or the human wielding it?
What do you guys think?
I think I've
Interesting.
already stated that. AI is leading to a combination of human intervention and automation. So you will have to
I'm,
stay on top of things. You have new tools. So one has to now master these tools. Better to realign than to resign.
I'm reminded of this dialogue between Sherlock Holmes and Watson, where Watson is surprised that Sherlock Holmes is not entirely familiar with the fact that the moon revolves around the Earth, and to which Sherlock Holmes says that my brain has only finite space. I have to devote myself to tasks that are more challenging rather than remembering these things. So, I mean, related to this, if AI can, eliminate repetitive tasks, it frees up the mind for innovation in a way. Provided we, as ChatGPT told you, and as you both of you have been saying, we utilize it in a way that we can drive AI to look into new directions and new vistas that were not available before. And that's the reason why we have made advances in, let's say, protein folding, and we have seen two Nobel Prizes being awarded recently on the field of AI. We are still cognizant of the risks. We are still cognizant of the problems with overtly depending upon Gen AI and the data that it depends on. We are cognizant of the fact that some of this data is also biased, and therefore we need to take that with a large pinch of salt and be careful about that. We'll just try to see if there are any more interesting questions. There's a question by Chetana Chandavarkar. She asks, what might be some really unexpected industry that will start relying on AI? Dr. Arun, you want to take this?
Really unexpected industries, I don't see any unexpected. I think all the way from the film industry to the process industry to the healthcare, manufacturing, infrastructure, every sector has been impacted by AI. So I don't. In fact, I would probably say some one or two new industries may come up in this process, but existing industries, I can't think of any industry that is not impacted by AI in some way or the other. It has impacted and will continue to impact because it's going to be so integral to all the technologies, the human activities, and so on, that there is no escape. And that's why I say better to realign.
Anand, any concluding remarks from you?
Well, let's just take that question. Huh? I'm curious to see.
Well,
okay.
here's a few offbeat picks. Farming. AI sensors tracking soil health, predictive weather models, drones spraying only the right spots. It's not your grandpa's tractor anymore. Fashion. Automated design suggestions and on-demand custom fits. Who knew your AI could tell you that flannel and tie-dye are a match made in style heaven? Funeral services. AI-generated eulogies and personalized tribute videos like an afterlife content creator.
Morbid? Maybe, but it's happening. Pet care, virtual vet diagnostics, puppy playtime cams that analyze dog moods, basically a cat whisperer 2.0. Playing devil's advocate, though, do we really want an AI deciding how to match our socks or compose our final farewell message? Then again, perhaps we already trust it for everything else. What do you think? Would you trust it for your funeral speech?
Maybe someday. Not yet. You're on mute, Srini.
I think other questions are all related to the same things that we discussed. So I'm not able to find. Okay, there is one interesting question by. I'll just flag it 1 second. Okay, I'm not able to
I
flag
just
it.
wanted to, in the meantime, say that for
Yeah.
teachers, like I mentioned in the last webinar also, for the teachers, it is not only time to redo their teaching material, but also come up with innovative questions that assume that the student has access to Gen AI. That assumes that the student is familiar with using these tools rather than being a prohibitive. Better be inclusive and design questions, and that means the teachers now have to dig deeper into their knowledge, and in that process also excite students with some thought-provoking questions, and perhaps go with more open-ended questions. It's time for open-ended questions than having a closed answer ones, right? So it's going to change, like the way we have changed questions after calculators have been allowed. We are no longer asking simple questions anymore. We are now able to ask very complex calculation questions, assuming the student has access to a calculator or a computer and so on. So all of that will change in the next decade. Things will change.
One more question by Vail Saranan, slightly a doomsday kind of question. Has AI can code as efficient as a professional, for instance, and companies lay off many employees? What happens to the market and demand and what happens to AI when there are no customers to afford it? I assume he's trying to say that it is going to affect white collar jobs so much so that it might disrupt the market. That's what I think he's trying to say.
Yeah, well, that has happened. I think nobody denies the fact that certain jobs are going to be taken away, but also certain new jobs will come up, especially with new skills. I'm a firm believer that Mother Nature is very kind. It will not allow things to be created in such a way that humans will be jobless and that there will be no money that you can earn and so on. It's not like that. I think I don't even want to use the word evolve. I think we keep changing. And this is another big change. Of course, it's a very high impact one. It has taken the world by storm and it is not giving too much time to realign. So that is the, I think, major concern. So I don't agree to the doomsday thing. But certainly some jobs will go away. Some low level routine jobs will go away. New jobs will come in. It has happened during industrial revolution. Earlier people had to ride tongas. Now they had to learn how to drive a car and how to fix a car. So now I have to learn how to use Gen AI and fix it, innovate it, customize it, nudge it, right? I have to really pamper it. Like Anand said, I have to probably give some incentive, do all of that. So that is what is going to happen. I mean, again, it takes back to the same thing, realign.
Anand, Dr. Arun flagged this in his presentation, and he also just said it now that the new kind of skill sets would be now in demand, such as those who perform good code reviews, who are able to debug better, and so on. In your company, are you seeing a shift in this direction?
Yeah, let me first share my screen and talk a bit about what I see on the job side of things first. Ravina, could you be able to project my screen so that others can see it? Maybe not. Well, then let me just talk through it. The World Economic Forum has released a survey of, not survey, projection of the fastest growing and the fastest declining jobs. Number 4 on the fastest growing jobs with a growth of something like 55%. Oh, and not immediately over the next 25 from 2025 to 2030, so over the next 6 years, is software and application developers. There's an interesting economic paradox that people have noted. When the cost of something goes down, the demand goes up because the value is so much higher. A programmer who could write, let's say, 100 lines of code last year can now suddenly write 300 lines of code at better quality. So I'm getting more out of him. Let's have more of this, is what people seem to be saying. So at least in the medium term, there does not seem to be that problem. But are new skills coming into the job market and getting hired? Not yet. That is still niche. What is happening is there are a few interested people who are learning the new things and filling in that role, because we're still at the stage where we don't know what we need. Once people figure that out, at that point, things will scale. We are still in the prototyping stage for new job roles.
And in the course of your work, Anand, how are you deploying this GenAI tools? Are you, is it deployed within the flow of your code systems that are in place? How do you do it, or are developers choosing their own, LLM models? In order to perform the task that you provide them?
There are broadly three kinds of applications that we see that are starting to use GenAI. One, existing applications where GenAI can make something better. For example, I have, let us say, a publishing system that publishes, let's say, books. Now, in that, the process of identifying whether the left column and the right column are perfectly aligned is something that can be delegated. So it is doing one small piece in a bigger workflow. Second is LLM only applications. That is, the whole purpose of the application is to do something that was not possible earlier. For example, I take a customer survey, give it to the application. It automatically tells me what are the topics people are talking about, which was not something that was possible earlier. Third class of applications which is emerging this year are agentic applications, where these LLM only applications are starting to do things in the real world. An example of which what OpenAI showed in their demo. You call up a system and it will make a reservation for you in a theater if required. Yeah, this year we will see that getting deployed in practice. So those are the three kinds of applications that we're building, with the majority of the work happening in the first category, a minority in the second category, the third is in the experimentation stage. Developers generally choose their own models. Different models are good for different things. They know the tasks, so they pick the right models.
I think we'll end here, unless I see any fresh questions that are asking anything fresh. No, I don't think so. Thank you very much, Dr. Arun. Thank you so much, Anand. I think we can continue to have more conversations on this going forward. As you rightly pointed out, this is an evolving area, and as Anand pointed out, new futuristic projects are possible and streams are possible now that GenAI provides robust code generation possibilities. As you also pointed out, there are some unanswered questions for which legislation is already being prepared in places like Europe, and perhaps with our own country also focusing on data protection. This is something we need to discuss publicly as well, in order to come up with the right ethical way to use the code that is generated by GenAI. And to sum up, for non-programmers, there is no shortcut to using GenAI and its code without understanding the basics and the as Dr. Arun pointed out. So go through your basic programming knowledge textbooks that were probably that you are probably already exposed to early in your during your graduate education, and that will keep you in good stead in trying to use GenAI effectively to generate code and use it for your purposes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Glad to have you.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Happy coding with GenAI.
Thank you.